The security guard didn't even blink. He looked me up and down, pointed at the service entrance, and said, "Staff goes that way." That was my welcome to my sister's engagement party. I should have corrected him. I should have told him I wasn't there to carry trays or refill glasses. But I just walked, letting the humiliation settle, the way cold air settles on bare skin. Because the people inside that polished future-in-law family my sister was desperate to impress, they had no idea who I really was. And the moment they found out, well, that was the beginning of the real party. My sister had called me 2 weeks before the party with the same tone she used when reminding me to dress appropriately for family photos. She spoke quickly, like she was afraid I might interrupt her script. She said the event would be elegant, important, full of people who understood success, and that I should try just this once to look like I was part of the family, instead of someone who accidentally wandered into their pictures. She didn't mean it to hurt. That was the worst part. She genuinely believed she was helping me avoid embarrassment. I told her I'd be there. She didn't ask anything else. She never does. For as long as I can remember, my sister has cared more about appearances than reality. Growing up, she'd straighten picture frames before hugging anyone hello. She was the one who insisted on matching dresses every Christmas, who memorized the names of every family at our school, who learned to speak the language of wealth before understanding the cost of it. My parents never corrected her. If anything, they encouraged it. To them, she was the one destined for the bright, polished future. I was the one they quietly prayed would find her path someday. They never asked where I went when I left town 3 years ago. They never questioned why I suddenly seemed busier, more grounded, less available. They assumed I was chasing another online project, one of those vague, unsteady things they could never quite explain to their friends. I let them think that. It was easier. Walking through the hotel kitchen that night, wearing jeans and an old sweatshirt, I slipped between cooks and servers like I belonged there. No one questioned me. No one hesitated. One of the banquet staff even handed me a folded stack of linen napkins, assuming I was part of the team. I didn't correct them either. Moving quietly has always been my specialty. Meanwhile, upstairs, my sister was probably rehearsing her smile in the mirror, adjusting the dress she'd spent weeks obsessing over, trying to make sure this party proved she was worthy of the family she was marrying into. She'd told me they came from old money, the type of people who owned summer homes and used words like heritage and legacy. She didn't mention that wealth fades quickly when mismanaged. She didn't know the cracks in their image were already spreading. As I waited for the service elevator, the kitchen noise humming behind me, I felt something settle inside my chest. A sense that tonight would unravel more than just a party. That the shiny world my sister wanted so badly would collide with a truth none of them were prepared for. And I already knew which direction the collision would send each of us. The moment the service elevator doors opened onto the ballroom level, the noise hit me first. Not music, not laughter, just tension, sharp bright and stretched thin, like an overtuned violin string. My sister was at the center of it, of course, directing staff in a tone that hovered between panic and superiority. She was rearranging the same centerpiece for the 4th time, snapping at anyone who came too close, trying to mold the room into the fantasy she'd built in her head. I stayed hidden near the catering station, watching her point at the linens. These look wrinkled. They weren't wrinkled earlier. Why are they wrinkled? A server apologized, even though the linens were perfectly flat. My sister didn't see me. Or maybe she chose not to. The groom's family stood nearby, radiating the type of confidence that comes from believing the world works for you by default. The mother inspected the floral arches with narrowed eyes, touching petals like she was evaluating produce. The father hovered behind her, performing interest while secretly checking his watch. The younger brother leaned against the bar, scanning the room like he was shopping for attention. I tried to pass through quietly, but the younger brother caught my path and stepped closer with that smirk men use when they think they're charming. "So, you working tonight?" he asked, gaze sliding down my sweatshirt. Before I could respond, he pulled a bill from his pocket, folded, casual, insulting. "If you're not busy later, I could use a drink brought up to the suite." I didn't take the bill, I didn't take the bait, I just turned away. He whispered behind me, "These staff girls get so sensitive." I felt it like a thumb pressed into a bruise. Inside the kitchen, things were spiraling. The head chef was pacing, muttering under his breath about last-minute changes. 2 hours earlier, my sister had demanded a completely different menu, then changed her mind, then changed it again. The staff wasn't angry anymore. They were defeated. One of the servers sighed, "If she sends this back one more time, I'm quitting." Another whispered. The groom's mother already complained the champagne was the wrong shade of gold. I kept peeling shrimp, my hands moving automatically as voices trickled in through the swinging doors. "Did you hear a dishwasher said? The groom's mother tried to pay one of the sound guys to fix something in the audio later. Fix how, make someone look bad." My gut tightened. I didn't need to guess who the target was. The room buzzed again when one of the floor managers rushed in pale. "The event payment bounced," he whispered to the chef. "It got returned this afternoon." The chef's spoon clattered onto the counter. "What do you mean, bounced? I mean there's no money." The truth rippled through the kitchen in a chilling wave. I felt my breath leave my chest, not from surprise, but from confirmation. Pieces I'd been sensing all night suddenly locked together like someone snapping the final tile into a mosaic I hadn't realized I was building. The guard at the door, my sister's desperation, the groom's family's forced elegance, the bribed staff, the tension that felt like an overinflated balloon. This wasn't a party. It was a performance, and the people on stage couldn't afford the price of the show. I washed my hands, untied the apron, and stepped away from the prep counter. No one noticed me leave. No one stopped me. I headed toward the elevator that led to the executive floor, a private wing no one downstairs even knew existed. As the doors slid shut, I caught one last glimpse of my sister spinning in place, trying so hard to control everything around her, but she couldn't control what came next. "Enough," I whispered to myself as the elevator rose. It was time for the truth to clock in. The executive floor was silent in a way the ballroom could never be. Thick carpets, muted lighting a hallway that smelled faintly of lemon polish instead of stress. When I stepped out of the elevator, the shift was immediate. Downstairs, I was invisible. Up here, I was the one who decided which world existed below. I pressed my fingertip to the sensor, and the private office door clicked open. The space looked exactly the same as it had that morning. Clean lines, soft gray furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. A place built for clarity, not chaos. I walked straight to the monitor wall. A few taps and every camera in the building answered me. Ballroom entrances, kitchen corridors, sound booth, angles, service hallways. I rewound the ballroom feed until I found what I was looking for. There she was, the groom's mother, leaning close to a staff member near the audio station. Her hand slipped something into his palm. Cash. He nodded quickly, eyes darting around like a guilty child. She gestured at the microphone stand, then at my sister, who was fussing with the flower arrangements again. The staffer pocketed the money, then plugged something small into the control panel. Sabotage. Organized, deliberate, practiced. I felt my heartbeat slow. Not speed up slow, the way it does when anger sharpens into purpose. I switched to another feed, the one near the main office where event invoices were processed. A notification flashed on screen. Payment returned. Insufficient funds. The ballroom downstairs had been dressed in gold and crystal. But the truth was written in a single line of text. Then another file blinked a report from earlier in the day. I opened it. Bills unpaid, mortgages stacked, liens accumulating. The so-called old money was held together with borrowed time and hollow pride. Their estate on the opposite coast was hanging on by a thread, one bank letter away from leaving their grasp entirely. I leaned back in the chair and exhaled. My sister didn't know this. She was chasing a fantasy she thought she needed, blind to the cracks. Blind to the way they looked at her like she was a life raft disguised as a fiancé. I didn't blame her, but I wasn't going to let her drown in someone else's debt. I called down to the security team, keeping my voice even. I asked them to pull copies of the interaction at the audio booth. Then I called the general manager and told him to wait for my signal before addressing the bounced event bill. Everything would be handled professionally, legally, clean. This wouldn't be revenge for humiliation at the door. This would be a correction truth replacing performance. Before heading back downstairs, I stood a moment at the window. The ballroom lights glowed through the glass like a glittering lie. They still thought I was a server. They still thought I didn't belong. They had no idea the ground beneath them had already shifted, and they were about to learn it the hard way. The elevator doors opened again onto the ballroom level, and the contrast hit me like a blast of heat. Downstairs, everything was noise and movement, servers weaving between tables, guests holding champagne like trophies, the kind of laughter that sounded rehearsed. No one noticed when I stepped out. I was still invisible, still wrapped in the disguise everyone had so generously handed me. Perfect. I walked slowly, carrying an empty tray just to complete the illusion. The younger brother of the groom was still by the bar, leaning back like he owned the place. When he saw me, he grinned, lifted his glass slightly, and mouthed something suggestive. If only he knew. My sister was at the center of the ballroom, fluttering around the decor, fidgeting with the floral arches as if perfection could hold the evening together. She looked anxious, hopeful, terrified, everything at once. She kept glancing toward the groom's mother, trying to decode every micro-reaction. The groom's mother stood tall, chin tilted like a blade, her eyes scanning the room as if she were inspecting property she might buy. She didn't see the cracks forming beneath her feet. She didn't notice the staffer she had bribed earlier, now hovering nervously near the sound booth, his hand brushing the pocket where he kept the cash. Her plan was about seconds away from detonating, but mine was already in motion. When the ballroom doors opened again, I saw the general manager walk in. He carried a folder in both hands, the way people hold objects that contain bad news. He scanned the crowd, hesitating, then his eyes landed on me. My sister raised her hand to wave him over. She even stepped forward, ready to receive whatever update he brought. But the general manager didn't break stride. He walked right past her, his attention locked on me. "Miss Lane," he said loudly. Gasps flickered across nearby tables. I let the quiet stretch. Then I folded the apron, set it on the bar, and straightened my sweatshirt. Suddenly, the room saw me. Not clearly, not fully, but enough to feel something shift. "Yes," I answered calmly. "I'm listening." He opened the folder. The event payment was returned. Insufficient funds. We need direction on how to proceed. The ballroom stilled. It wasn't silence, more like a breath held collectively. The groom's mother looked as if someone had slapped her. The groom's father stared at the floor. The younger brother straightened abruptly. My sister froze, mid-step, confusion flooding her face. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and connected it to the ballroom's AV system. The screens flickered, then filled with security footage angles from the hallway, the bar, the audio booth. And then the image zoomed. It showed the groom's mother leaning in, slipping cash into a staff member's hand, pointing at the microphone. The staffer inserting a device into the sound panel, her lips forming instructions. The room responded like a wave hitting shore. First a murmur, then voices overlapping, then stunned silence. My sister let out a tiny sound, something between shock and betrayal. The groom stared at his mother, horror widening his eyes. "What did you do?" She didn't answer. I didn't wait. "There's more," I said, tapping the next file. Public records filled the screens, mortgages stacked on top of each other, delayed payments, liens, warnings from banks, a foreclosure notice sitting like a bruise on the page. "They aren't the old money legacy they claim to be," I said quietly. "They plan to use this wedding and my sister as a financial reset." People whispered, shocked, delighted, appalled. The groom stepped back from his parents as if realizing he'd been standing on the edge of a cliff. My sister stared at the screens, trembling. "You knew this." "I confirmed it tonight," I told her. But the signs were everywhere. The groom's mother finally snapped. "This is an invasion of privacy. How dare you? These are public records," I cut in. "Anyone can access them." She opened her mouth again, but before she could speak, I tapped the final clip. Footage of her going through my sister's handbag. Gasps. More whispers. My sister staggered. "Why would you go through my things?" The groom's mother didn't answer. Her lips pressed into a thin line. That's when I stepped into the center of the ballroom. This event should never have been about status or image, I said. But tonight it became something worse: manipulation, sabotage, lies. I looked directly at the groom's mother. You tried to destroy someone else's reputation to protect your own. You tried to use my sister as collateral, and you tried to sabotage an event in a building you had no idea belonged to me. The groom's mother froze. My sister blinked, trying to process everything. You own this place, I nodded. And the rest of the chain. Shock moved across her face in slow motion, surprise, confusion, guilt. Something soft and heartbreaking. Why didn't you tell me I tried? I said, gently. But you were too busy worrying about how I looked to hear what I had accomplished. Her chin wobbled. The groom turned toward me. I swear I didn't know they were doing this. If I had? This isn't about you choosing sides, I interrupted. This is about choosing truth. I faced the groom's mother. For your actions tonight, you have two options. She stiffened. One, leave quietly right now, and I will absorb the cost of this event as a gift to my sister. 2, I report the attempted sabotage, attempted fraud, and bounced payment, and let the authorities handle it. Her husband tugged her arm urgently. Let's go. She didn't argue. She walked toward the exit, her heels tapping out the tempo of defeat. The younger brother hurried behind them. The groom stayed. He turned to my sister with tears in his eyes. I don't care about the money. I care about you. I want to build a life with you on our own terms, not theirs. My sister sobbed, collapsing against him. But then she turned back to me, her voice breaking. I'm so sorry. For everything. For not seeing you. For not listening. For letting my insecurity turn you into something smaller in my mind. I stepped forward and pulled her into my arms. She cried harder. You're not small, I whispered. You just forgot who you were. Tonight was a reminder. Behind us, the guests slowly resumed talking. The band began playing a softer song. A few staff members gave me grateful nods. The room settled into a strange mix of shock and relief, a party turned, courtroom turned lesson. My sister lifted her head. What happens now? Now I said you choose a future built on honesty instead of image. The groom slipped his hand into hers. I want that too. I nodded. Then start from the ground up, together. As they stood beside me, quiet, humbled, real, I felt something inside me loosen. This wasn't revenge. This was clarity, a new beginning carved out of old wounds. Tonight, truth didn't just come out, it came home. The ballroom emptied quickly after that. The groom's parents slipped out without looking back, leaving behind the last fragments of the image they'd tried so hard to polish. Staff members moved quietly, relieved, almost lighter, as if someone had finally opened a window in a stuffy room. My sister and her fiancé stayed behind with me. They weren't glamorous or poised anymore. They were just two people standing in the ruins of a night that had almost broken them. And in that rawness, something honest finally appeared. The next morning, my sister showed up at the hotel in simple clothes and asked where she should start. I pointed her toward housekeeping. She didn't argue. She wanted to understand the people she'd spoken over, ordered around, dismissed without thought. The groom joined the accounting team, determined to face the numbers his family had avoided for years. Weeks passed. They moved into a modest apartment across the city, paying their own rent, learning how to shop with coupons, laughing at burnt dinners. I watched them grow into themselves. As for the groom's family, their estate on the opposite coast eventually slipped into foreclosure. They relocated south, chasing a quieter life. Justice didn't roar. It unfolded quietly, exactly the way truth prefers. A year later, my sister married in the hotel garden. No chandeliers, no performances, just sunlight, a few close friends, and a promise built on truth instead of expectation. She walked through the service entrance on purpose that day, smiling like she finally understood where her real life began. I stood in the back, watching her step into a future she chose, not one chosen for her. And for the first time in a long time, everything felt right. If this story stayed with you, share your thoughts below and hit subscribe so you won't miss the next chapter.